Good morning, everyone. And today is what's today's date? April 9th, 2024, and we will begin our public health and safety meeting for today. I see Leader, I see Kelly, and I'm here, so we will dispense with roll call. So for the next agenda on the item, I see a district court update by Lisa Park and Frankie Peters from the Tumwater District Court Executive Office.
Peter, we need to approve the meeting minutes.
Oh, that was not on the agenda. I dropped the ball again. It's too early. Oh, okay. So,
Item number 3.
okay. So I see. Can I get a vote for the district court for the minute agenda for to later? Is this for last month?
The agenda I have open is Tuesday for April 9th, and item number 3 says approval of minutes, public health and safety meeting, March 12th.
Oh, I have January open. That's why. Okay.
I'm not going backwards, Peter.
I have January open. Okay. On that score, can we approve the minutes for that meeting while I try to dig up this email?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. All right. So we proceed. Thank you.
We need to vote, Peter.
1 second. Let me dig up this agenda. When technology throws you a loop, it really does throw you a loop. Okay. All right. Can we take a vote for approval of our last minute meeting? I still don't see. I can't dig up my agenda. I'm going to try to do that as we continue. Can we take a vote for that, please?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then, Lieta, since you have the agenda open, can you please introduce the next item on the agenda while I try to dig up the actual agenda for today?
Yeah, I'm happy to. The next item, Peter, that we have is the interlocal agreement with Thurston County for Indigenous Defense Legal Services, amendment number 4. And it shows Troy, who just showed his face, is going to lead this.
I also did not have the agenda open, so I didn't know if I was going first or not. But here I am.
Look at how flexible we are.
That's right. We're nimble. Thanks for having me today. This is a pretty straightforward, simple amendment. This is the same contract we've had for the Office of Public Defense for many years now, and the folks from the Office of Public Defense, Patrick O'Connor, presented to this committee last October to give an annual update. And so, and the current contract expires at the end of 2024. So this is just a contract extension to go through 2025 and 2026. The cost is just about the same. It only went up $5,000, which is pretty surprising and amazing. And so I can certainly take any questions. And if there aren't any questions, since you've recently had a presentation, our ask for today is to place this on the consent agenda on the April 16th City Council meeting.
Troy, I have a question.
Okay.
Peter, is that okay? Is that good?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. I can't remember. All these contracts are blending into each other, and it's come up in another committee I'm on. There's discussion in the contract, like how the rate goes up. Can you remind us how, so it went up 1.1%, which is amazing, right? Another contract I was looking at, it's going up. They were doing 3%, or like said CPI. How is it determined? Is there any inflation or the prices? How does that work for this?
So this one, they do some financial projections. So they look at the past history, they look at the cases that are kind of in the queue right now, and they try to predict what that's going to be over the next couple of years. And so it's kind of a trend analysis, You'll probably remember through COVID, arrests and cases actually went down. And the nice thing about this contract is they only charge us for what's actually used. And so they do their best to estimate the maximum this could cost. And then typically it'll come in a little bit lower because it's based on the amount of attorney hours spent defending people.
Awesome. Thank you for that background, Troy.
You know, Leader, the agenda I have on my PC is 1-9. I don't see any agenda in there.
So are you looking at Nextcloud? Did you open Nextcloud and the council
Yes.
packets and then scroll down?
Yes, yes, yes.
Because, okay, so what did I do? So council packets. And then I scrolled to the week of 4/8/24 and I see PHS 0409 2024.
So I think what is going on is that either my PC did not sync with the server at the City Hall, because all it's showing is 1 January. That's all that is showing. It's not showing anything in April.
Kelly
Peter,
has unmuted.
Peter, you can get it off of the City of Tumwater webpage too. It'll give you the agenda packet.
Lisa, can you send that to Peter?
I did actually, Peter. I sent you a link in by email that will get you to the packet for today.
Yeah, I see that. I am just going to do it on my cell phone.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Okay, so I see here on the cell phone, we've done with the interlocal agreement with the Thurston County for Energy and Defense Legal Services Amendment number 4, Troy Niemeyer.
Yes, that's what we just did.
So now I have Thurston County Public Defense Contract Amendment number 4 by Chief Wicks.
We need to make a motion to place the amendment number 4 on the April 16, 2024 consent calendar.
All right. It's only Tuesday.
Peter, I'll move to place the Thurston County Office of Public Defense Contract Amendment number 4 on the April 16, 2024 City Council consent calendar with a recommendation to approve and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
So moved. So all in favor, please, yeah or no?
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, that amendment passes. So we have the next number 5 is body-worn camera by Chief Wicks.
Thank you, Councilmember Agabi and council members. This morning, we're coming in front of you again. This is part of our biannual budget process. Every 2 years, we come back to you, and we've done this the last several years to discuss the implementation of body-worn cameras. Commander Mason and Dr. Oliver Bowers are going to bring you up to speed with the latest information, and this is for discussion only at this point. So I'll turn it over to Commander Mason.
Thanks, Chief. Council members, thank you for this opportunity. As you can see, Doc Bowers has already started our presentation, so we're ready to roll. As Chief Wicks said, every couple of years we come and brief the council or public health and safety on body-worn camera technology, its impact, and kind of some of the what we're seeing locally and regionally as this technology grows. We last presented this to public health and safety about 2 years ago, and when that last presentation was done, I don't believe any agency in Thurston County had adopted body-worn cameras. Since then, Olympia, Lacey, Yelm, and Thurston County have all adopted body-worn camera technology and deployed it to their within their organizations. So it's pretty interesting to see the growth of body worn camera technology over the past 10, 15 years. And it was one of those things that when it first was brought to our attention, we saw the power in it. I thought that every agency would have body worn cameras within a short period of time. And then I came to understand Washington State retention, redaction, and public disclosure laws. And I thought no agency in Washington State will have body worn cameras. And now we're starting to see the pendulum swing back for transparency, for recording, and just for public expectations as far as use of technology and implementation. So if you were here for our presentation 2 years ago, it's going to be similar, but we've also done additional research in evidence-based impacts of body-worn cameras, as well as the impacts to our regional partners. And now we've incorporated that into this presentation for your consideration. So, Doc, can you roll to the next screen? Just body-worn camera basics. Body-worn cameras are record audio and video upon activation. It's simple, but that's their main purpose. Camera activation is determined by each department's policy and is always crafted to the needs of the community and the organization. We've seen organizations that have very narrow requirements, allowing officers broad discretion of when they can activate their cameras or turn them off. And then we have we've seen policies and procedures by organizations that give almost no discretion to the officers, and basically, so as long as once they step out the back door of the police department or sheriff's office, they're to activate their camera and basically leave it going while they're on active patrol. And so the policy is determined by the organization and the communities that we serve. Footage is automatically downloaded once they get back to the police department, very similar to the technology that we have in our in-car camera systems. So when they're out in the field, when officers are working, they record interactions, and then when they get back to the police station, it's generally downloaded. There are some different technologies that can download or upload from the field, but that is really kind of an outlier. Most of the technology is done when you get to a base station, and it's held according to state and departments' retention and records plans. Body-worn cameras, we've seen they're worn on the chest. Throughout the years, we've seen different companies try different setups to get a better viewing angle. The chest, every angle has, or every position has different advantages. The chest is good because it has a very central viewpoint, but it can also easily be blocked if an officer brings their hands up, and it also doesn't show the same line of sight or the viewpoint of an officer and their eyes. And we've seen cameras positioned on glasses, we've seen cameras positioned on shoulders, but industry trends have moved to basically cameras are generally positioned on the chest. Go ahead, Doc. So now I'm going to turn this over to Doc Bowers, because this is his strength. One of the things that we've done extensively in preparation for this presentation to you, as we've asked Doc Bowers to look into the research, the evidence of the efficacy of body-worn cameras, and kind of bring that to bear into our decision-making process. So I'm going to turn it over to Doc Bowers right now.
As Commander Beeson said, my role in this was to really dig into what we already know from research across the country, across the state, just to really understand how body-worn cameras impact police departments and their communities, and significant and important components throughout the adoption process. So since they originally created effectively, they have been researched from that very beginning. However, in more recent years, we have a much greater understanding because the initial research was limited to specific situations, a very small group of officers, and only a handful of departments. The benefits that came out of those studies were then generalized across the board. But obviously things have changed a lot since then. The first studies that we did get showed that there was increased transparency and perceptions of police legitimacy, decreased use of force, decreased complaints against officers, expedited resolutions of complaints, improved evidence collection, all of these things. However, since then, the research into body-worn cameras has become much more robust, more scientific, much more data, and things have changed quite substantially on that front. The DOJ and the National Institute of Justice funds and comprehensive reviews research into body-worn cameras, and their research on it, which is really accessible to all to go look at. It's actually a fascinating site. Demonstrates some of the complexities and contradictory issues within the research itself. So the NIG research shows like this. Down the left-hand side.
Bowers.
Yep.
Councilmember Dolph has a question.
Oh, apparently I didn't have her on my grid. Oh,
Thanks, Chief. Dr. Bowers, I'm wondering, do you want us to engage with when we have questions on the slide, or would you prefer us to wait to the end? Because we haven't seen the slides in advance, so what do you prefer?
probably at the end, because I think we're going to cover more of the bases, and then if there's stuff that comes up, like if you can not remember, you know what I mean? Like if it's something that then
You're
doesn't
asking a
get
lot, Doctor. Okay, thank you.
just because we will progress through. So yeah, questions at the end. Okay, so down the left-hand side, we have the type of impact that the studies measured. And then we have whether or not the study showed a statistically significant increase, a statistically significant decrease, or no statistically significant impact in that thing. But as you can see with use of force, some studies showed that there was a statistically significant increase in uses of force. Others showed that there was a decrease, and some showed that there was no statistically significant impact. With things like complaints, you have decreases or no effects. Injuries, always decreases. Fatalities, no change. Officer injuries, no change. Proactive activities by officers, so going out proactively engaging, these were shown to decrease or not change. And arrests and or citations were shown to increase or not change at all. Now, the reason I like to show this as a grid is to really show how one study can show that, wow, this component goes up significantly, and yet in another department, it goes down significantly. This is really about looking at the impacts of these different components, because obviously with body-worn cameras, the research often shows officers are less likely to engage in things like proactive activities, as we can see, which kind of, it changes the officer and the community interaction, which, you know, can lessen the opportunity to use force. However, it also can kind of muddy how the data looks. So one study showed that departments that have body-worn cameras had 38% fewer use of force incidents, but also 46% fewer stops and 39% fewer arrests. So there were less uses of force, but it's because the officers were engaging less with their community. So it kind of, it's not like a straight answer on any of these. Conversely, of course, other studies showed that officer proactivity declined, arrests increased because officers are less inclined to use discretion because of the camera, and arrest rates and the likelihood of use of force then went up significantly. The point of this whole section is to show that there is no universal metric for BWC success. So entering into body-worn cameras, the department cannot go in saying, our goal here is to, for example, reduce instances of use of force, because there is no context where that actually kind of is a categorical. how and whether these things change is entirely dependent on the community, how they perceive the police and their legitimacy, the pre-existing relationship that they have, the demographics of the population, how the program is implemented, myriad factors all like come together to determine what will happen when any specific department gets body-worn cameras. The studies do show that the body-worn cameras increase these perceptions of transparency, but this is heavily dependent on the community. So when you implement it suggests that there is an increased level of accountability for the department's perspective and from the community's perspective. However, this is hugely dependent on the footage. So missing footage, unreleased footage, things that are under investigation cause problems, the activation policies, the department policies on when to release, how it's released, protection, all those type of things. This availability of footage makes a huge difference in whether or not the community views the department as transparent. So the availability of the footage, internal investigations and disciplinary, all of these things can affect whether or not that view of transparency is, exists in your community. And obviously problems arise when there are flaws or inherent flaws in the body-worn camera that do not capture the incident at all. So as Commander Mason said, if it's a chest-mounted unit, which nowadays they usually are, there are times where that will completely obfuscate what's going on in front of it. There are issues with how the lenses themselves perceive distance, which can completely affect how an incident is viewed from the outside as opposed to how the officer viewed it. There's fantastic research into, demonstrating that slight differences in cameras can show that a person looks like they're really far away, but in truth is actually quite close to the officer. So all of these things and building that relationship with your community, around a body-worn camera program helps improve its legitimacy. And then, of course, you have to balance the privacy and public interest when you are releasing footage and redacting footage and getting things out, because it becomes an expectation for the community. The interactions between police officers and community members are placed under a new and additional scrutiny. So the reason we have to talk about this is because the ways in which officers interact with citizens are highlighted when they have body-worn cameras. Their self-awareness regarding the camera, the person's self-awareness regarding the camera, it changes everything. And it means that one incident is then in the public for everyone to see and replay over and over again. Even something that is a completely within policy, within protocol interaction can be taken out of context, can be distorted, can be judged. I mean, there are instances where someone could look at something and say, well, the officer shouldn't have done that. But then you look at their department policy and you say, but that's what they're trained to do. That's an appropriate response. That was all, entirely justified. But if the public looks at it and says they don't agree with it, that causes more problems. However, the research has now shown that body-worn cameras substantially increase officer stress, anxiety, mental fatigue, leading to high rates of burnout. Basically, the pressure that goes along with wearing body-worn camera for the entirety of their shift and knowing that every interaction will be recorded, everything that's spoken will be there. Even if nothing goes wrong, just the fact that it is there permanently creates this stress and mental anguish and whatnot. And like I said, this can be a really significant factor for the officers, because it can lead to, stress, burnout, a lot of resignations and whatnot. The research does show that organizational support can mitigate some of these effects, but the negative effects are really, really demonstrative in the research.
I'll take this from here, Doc, if that's okay.
Yep.
The other thing that we really didn't understand nearly as much in our presentation a couple years ago was the impacts to our administration, our support services, and our supervisory staff. We've seen this with the other agencies in our Thurston County. The impacts to the administrative staff, retention. Redactions have to be accomplished in real time. So if you have a 30-minute video, you have to sit and watch it for 30 minutes to make sure the redaction is done and that it is done according to policy and laws. And then if you have multiple cameras on scene, say you have 4 officers, you've taken a 30-minute interaction or a 15-minute interaction and quadrupled it as far as the impacts on the front office staff. And then you also have indexing, review, redaction, that kind of thing, just taking care of this new or this different record medium. So there's a lot of positives to body worn cameras. There's a lot of things, and I will point out that our union, who was not in favor of body worn cameras last time we did this presentation, has changed their position and is very in favor of body worn cameras for their members to be deployed. So there are a lot of positive that can come from the implementation, a good implementation of a body worn camera system. But there's also a lot of information that we didn't have last time we were presenting to you that we wanted to make sure that you were aware of. And then, we would also have to increase staffing by at least 1 to help with the increased workload, body cam redactions and retentions and disseminations. So, Doc. And just some of the fiscal impacts. Councilmember Dahlhoff, you mentioned that you had not seen this data before. There was supposed to be a memo in your packet on body worn camera implementation concepts, and all this is from that. I just want to make sure.
Oh yeah, I read that. It's
Okay.
well, it's different when you have the slides, right?
Yeah.
I like to see the slides in advance because then it helps me when I make my notes. But yes, I read the
Okay.
packet.
Okay, I just wanted, so everything in here, we've actually cut this from that packet. I just want to make sure that you had received it. That's all.
Yes, thank you, Commander. It's just when it's presented this visually, I connect with it better than pages and pages and pages and pages of text.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure that you had the ability to take a look at it. That's all.
You're golden. Thanks, Commander.
So, can we make a copy of that statement, please? I'm golden. So then you see fiscal considerations. And really, outside of some inflation pieces, and actually, I believe from 2 years ago, there's actually a reduction in the equipment costs, but you will see an increase in most other line items because of inflation. We've also included one of the things that we've seen regionally and throughout most of Washington State is there is a pay increase for officers for implementation of body worn cameras. It's an extra added stressor. It's an extra added requirement. It's an extra added to do on top of the many things we ask out of our officers. So there is a fiscal piece to it. And then we've also added a sergeant position to oversee this program that wasn't there in our presentation 2 years ago. And one of the things that we've seen over the past 2 years specifically, actually more than that, over the past 4 years is the massive increase in a requirement of supervision within our profession. And we have pretty much used up all of our capacity for that. And an example is just we have a lieutenant that is in charge of training and equipment. And some of that equipment is the in-car camera systems that we've deployed. And because of that lieutenant is working at max capacity, trying to keep the technology in order, making sure that policies are being followed, making sure that downloads are being accomplished, working with IT. And so we don't have the supervision capacity to run a program like this at the high level that we would want to, and quite honestly, our community would require out of us within our current capacity. So that's why we added a sergeant position. The police service specialist and the IT specialist were positions that we had identified previously and still need. But we did add a sergeant position to oversee this program and other technology programs and equipment pieces as we go forward. So next screen. And then there's also just some, one-time costs. You have to buy new vests. We have to do some infrastructure pieces to make sure that we can run the system. And then the last piece is some of the unknowns. We didn't quantify them, but we just wanted you to be aware of them. And it's something that we think about when adding any kind of a program, whether it be like a volunteer program or, a technical equipment program like this. Where do we put people to support that? And we're running out of space. We've run out of space. We're at almost max capacity. And so where would we add this sergeant? Where would we add the front office person? So, and those are just things that we haven't quantified, but we wanted you to be aware of because we are aware of them too, within consideration of implementation of a program of this magnitude. One of the things that we believe in fully is that if you're going to take on a program like this, one, our community has to be engaged in this process, and our community needs to have input in this. And we need to run a program like this at a very high level because the implications, the risk of not doing it well can significantly impact our operations and our credibility within our community and throughout the region. So I believe that was it.
So what you will see, council members, before we open it up for questions, is you're going to see this come forward to you through the budget process. You'll see these costs come in there. You'll also see it. We'll get into the details in the strategic growth plan at the June 11th meeting, where how we plan on trying to roll this out. And so we'll get into more details. So today's presentation was to get it in front of you again, like we do every 2 years. And then you'll see it come through the budget process for more details and more direct input in what we want to do with this cost and all other costs. So with that, we open it up to your questions. Councilmember Dolliff.
Peter, does that work if I ask my questions?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that presentation. I appreciate it. So let me go to my questions. The one thing is I appreciate the research. Was there any research regarding the Association of Washington Cities when they made body-worn cameras a legislative priority last session? Was that incorporated into this? And what research or discussions were made with our local jurisdictions that are currently using this technology?
So as far as, go ahead, Commander.
I don't know about the first part. As far as we reached out to all the jurisdictions, Olympia, Lacey, Yelm, and Thurston County to get their input on impacts with the body warrants, what systems they use, how they're functioning, general observations. So we absolutely have engaged them to get their input and also just to understand their policies on body warrants, to understand how they implement them and deploy them. And there's differences within each of the jurisdictions, how they're utilized. So, but we absolutely have reached out to them and engaged them in this process. So we have a better understanding of where we would fit in and how we could learn from some of their growing pains.
It would be beneficial for me in that table to show the different areas that you're looking at, what our local jurisdictions are also finding as well regarding officer stress and anxiety, right? That would help because, we have that nationwide data, but, our community is unique in itself. So what are our local jurisdictions finding? Because a lot of times they're dealing with the same people we are.
Yes, the one thing I would say is that would be that.
I see Dr. Bowers making a face at me, so I don't know what that
would be
means.
anecdotal. It's so new.
Yeah,
I know that they could quantify it, but they could absolutely. We could have examples of it, right?
That would help.
I think one of the concerns I have obviously is that we are similar to our neighboring jurisdictions, but we are even different to them, and we see that
Oh,
in
for
our
sure.
current data and our current ratings, and the type of data needed to collect to see for like the officer's stress, health, anxiety component. They're not collecting the data. We could collect the data, but it has to be a positive effort because the types of data that departments collect, they don't collect data that would answer those questions. So even for some of the things that we would want to look to regionally, like I look across the state as an entity to see how it affects, you know, departments across Washington. And a lot of the research that's gone through WASPID really shows the same things that the NIJ data shows, just obviously in different scales. And the problem that we have regionally, especially if you want to look at, you know, our department, is most departments don't have someone like me who is actually looking at the data and trying to collect the data internally. They're only collecting the data that they're already getting, because this takes, you know, building data sets based on, you know, answering whatever questions you want. So as Commander Mason said, you know, there may be some good anecdotal data, but this is more of a long-term process to see like the actual impacts and the actual differences. And that gets much more kind of muddied.
Noted. Thank you. One more question. Oh, sorry.
Can I
Chief.
answer your first one, Councilmember? So the question regarding AWC, that is something we're aware of. That it's been a legislative priority the last couple of sessions. But one of the things we did is obviously the position of our union members was very important, and their stance on it, and even more so our own community. As part of the strategic growth plan process and the focus groups we did, that was one of the topics that was mentioned once, but really hasn't been a priority for our community. With that being said, it's constantly weighing it, like we have done the last several bienniums with you guys through the budget process. You know, and I think it is coming to the forefront more than it ever has. And like the commander explained, you know, even though it didn't come up in the focus groups, and you'll see in the strategic growth plan presentation, we have a rollout plan for this. It's coming one way or another. So
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. That goes into my next thing. One of the with this presentation and the report is the timeline. So I see this is proposed for 25-26, right? We've had 10 years of research. Things are changing, modified. All of our local jurisdictions have this technology now, and it's been proposed for 25-26. So the question I have is, we still have 8 months left of this year. We know the hiring challenges of filling positions. So is this proposal to wait 8 more months and then try and fill the new positions, or do you plan to do internal promotions, knowing that the challenge of filling the positions? So when is this realistic, and why can't we phase it in now, or what can we do in this budget and make an amendment to get this going? And that ties into, when do we expect to receive the Thurston County Prop 1 funds?
I'll answer that. We have other projects going that take priority over the body-worn cameras right now. Namely our RMS replacement. And so what the plan is, see, now you're jumping into the June 11th presentation.
I can't help myself, Chief. I can't help myself.
No, and I can answer this really quick. The plan is to try to get the positions to support the work. This is we've told you this in the last couple of biennials, to properly input a body-worn camera system is a 12 to 18 month process when done right, because of all the community interactions we need to do. So
Is that what it took? Is that how long it took for Thurston County, Lacey and Olympia?
No, and that was most of them will tell you that was one of their mistakes. They implemented it without a lot of input, and now they're having to go and work backwards. We're working forward. And so we're going to get the things in place first. We have the RMS project ready to go into contract on being implemented next year. And so we will start the process hiring people to get the positions in place in 25, start all the process in late 25, early 26, and hopefully get it implemented sometime in late 26.
So we can, I'll save this for the June meeting, but I don't like that timeline. So we can talk about that at the June meeting.
Yep.
So, Kelly, do you have any questions?
Yes. Dr. Bowers, the stress component on law enforcement, that's interesting to me. And I was wondering if there was a time frame associated with that. Like, was it at the beginning when cameras were implemented, or was it throughout? I'm just interested in that. And
Um,
also the training aspect, because I'm making an assumption, which I know I shouldn't do, but I'm assuming that new officers moving through CJTC are being trained as if they're going to go to an organization with body worn cameras. And so then I'm wondering if that might add some training components that we might need.
Council member, we just froze and we were gone for about 45 seconds. So I haven't heard anything for the last 45 seconds or so.
I don't know how long I've been talking.
Yeah, I've heard nothing since Councilmember Doloff was done.
Oh. I was asking about the stress on officers because of the body worn cameras, and I wondered if there was a timeline associated, like was that when they were first brought on, or if it was throughout, like you never get over that stress of kind of feeling like your big brother's watching sort of thing. And then my other question was about training, because I'm assuming, and I shouldn't, that new law enforcement officers coming through CJTC are probably being trained as if they're going to go to an organization with body worn cameras. And what does that mean for our officers who have been in law enforcement for longer? How will that training be matched up?
I'll let Dr. Bowers answer the first part of the one about the research. As far as the training portion goes, we've had in-car cameras for close to 25 years. And whether it's an in-car camera or a body-worn camera, it really is about, when it comes down to it, it's about where it's recording and how, and the duration it's recording. So this won't be entirely new to our staff. It's just where the recording and how long. Dr. Bowers?
As for the stress and anxiety, most of the research shows that there really is no kind of difference between whether you're a veteran, seasoned officer with, you know, decades of experience or a new officer. It's the inherent stress associated with being recorded, whether or not that's a new thing to you or, you know, it's something you've experienced before. Because I mean, like, you know, we've had dash cams for decades. It's just the idea that when you are out by yourself or you're out with others, you are being like consciously recorded. Because I mean, obviously a passerby or something could record you, but it's you knowing that the whole time, even when you get back in your vehicle, everything is different. No matter what happens, that thing will still be recording. And the research, honestly, was really fascinating. It really showed that kind of it doesn't matter, you know, whether you are literally a fresh out of the academy officer or seasoned, or this is even for officers who were, you know, massively supporting body cams or opposing body cams, none of that really mattered. It was this human component of you're doing your work and suddenly you have a camera with you the whole time. And that just changed everything. In terms of like how long, it wasn't just the implementation process. You know, there were pretty high levels of stress because it's something new. But what was most interesting to me about the research is it never really waned. For the people who got affected by the stress and anxiety, it was a pretty flat line. And then obviously their stress and anxiety caused them to, you know, burn out, resign, leave policing, whatever it was. Because once you get affected by it, it's not like the body cams go anywhere. So it just becomes the new normal. And that is, it now unfortunately looks, especially with the amount of research that we have going back to, you know, to the early 2000s, this is just an inherent component of being a human and knowing that as part of your job, everything gets recorded, which, yeah, I wouldn't like it, but that's me.
So, Dr. Powers, I have several questions. Can you please bring up that NIJ research slide, please?
I can do that. Oh, well.
So this slide here shows statistical significant data points.
Mhm.
So in order for the average person on the street to be able to make an inference about this data, there are some assumptions that went into preparing this data. So I'm just going to ask you your top level, some basic questions. So in collecting these data points, were you looking at, say, for example, cities that have active community policing programs and comparing those in coming up with these data points?
No,
I'm
this
assuming that data was from you.
this is a broad overview of all body-worn camera research, which is processed and analyzed at the DOJ level. So this includes all different types of departments, all different types of components.
And Councilmember Agabi, can I add something real quick?
Yes, please.
So one of the challenges in our profession is that we don't use standardized models for how we do our job. And I'll use an example. When you have a data point on use of force, there's no standard definition of what a use of force is across the nation. So we've had this conversation in this committee before, how Tumwater Police Department captures use of force is different than how other agencies capture use of force. So, and then you take that to a model such as a deployment of a body-worn camera system, and there is no standardization of that outside of potentially you have a body cam on. Outside of that, it's how it's used, when it's, Washington State has very broad public disclosure laws. The public has access to tons of this information. In many states, if the police department, in some states, if the police department doesn't want to release the data, it doesn't get released. So we'd have to dig down, and I let Doc Bowers maybe chime in on this to say that, to use like information is really challenging to how it would be deployed in Washington State. So these are very broad models, and it wasn't meant to confuse anyone, or it wasn't meant to, confuse the issue at all. And maybe that's what we're doing. We just wanted you to see that there's no specific evidence, or there's no specific research that says body-worn cameras are amazing for all aspects, or they're really bad in all aspects. It's just we wanted to show you that we have done the research, we've looked at the evidence, and it shows that there is some conflict in understanding and deployment, implementation of body-worn camera systems. So I guess I just wanted to share that. I don't know if it helps out at all, but one of the challenges of our profession is we do not have standardized models or standardized definitions.
And
Thank you.
based on, oh, sorry.
So my intent in asking that question is to say to all of us that while I agree with your point, Dr. Commander Mason, that there is no general way of looking at this, but on the whole, if the police department have a policy that says you would do X, Y, Z, and that X, Y, Z becomes how we operate, that by itself will capture some data points. So in terms to compare between, say, Lacey and Tumwater and Olympia, our policy, regardless of the differences, should be similar, because this is law enforcement. Law enforcement does not exist in the vacuum. So does Tumwater have a active community policing program?
I'm not sure I understood your question, Councilmember Agabi.
So I'm trying to understand, if we were to deploy this today and looking at this NIJ research that does not really, it doesn't really tell us one way or the other if body-worn cameras either better or bad. I've written with on 2 occasions with our police officers, and I have seen the way that they conduct their business. In my opinion, that was splendid on those 2 occasions, and how they interact with the citizenship. So that right there describes or informs me that we have some kind of policy on how an officer interact with the public. That by itself is a data point that will be captured when a body camera is worn, so for when we go to do a research, or when something happened and we present our data points to say that no, that didn't happen. This is how it happened. So my question again is, do we in Tumwater have an active community policing program that is in sync with our enforcement policies?
Councilmember Dolph, can you help me? I'm not understanding the question.
Yeah, I actually have a question too. So Peter, you're talking about an active community police program? Like you're saying like community members or our police?
So if I'm a police officer and I go out into the community to go do an enforcement stuff or whatever, I would have known at the back of my mind that our policy says, A, this is what you're going to do, and this is what you are not going to do. And then, based upon that policy, each officer will operate according to that guidelines. So my question again is, this is a very simple question that I think you guys are thinking at a very high level. What I'm asking is, many police departments, at least in the 80s and the 90s, have active community policing programs that in how they go out into the community to do a PR for the work that they do. So I'm asking, do we have similar programs in Tumwater?
So if you're asking about community policing programs, what I'll tell you is that community policing is not a model or a specific activity. It's a general philosophy of how we engage our community and that we serve our community. There's no one policy that directs that. It's kind of a general philosophy that starts from the day you get hired with Tumwater PD, and it's ingrained in all of our trainings and how we interact with our community, is that we are servants to the community and that we are here to help provide an environment that is safe and highly functional for all. So there's no one program, there's no packet that says this is what you will do. We have to deploy and provide our services based on the needs and the expectations of our community.
Okay, so I see what is going on. Okay, let me react. Okay, let me restate that question. So if Tumwater High School is having an activity, do we have officers that comes by and give out badges, balloons? And
Peter, do you mean separate from the school resource officers that we have?
Yes, that kind of talk with the youth and then I drive by and continue on their.
It would just depend on the circumstance, if we were invited, if we have the time, the margin of time to do that, if the officers are inclined. They have that ability. I can't tell you that we would be at every activity that occurs at the high school.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you. So I will move on to the BWC physical consideration slide that has 546,000 and some change. Please. Yeah, this one. So the slide here. So question number 1, how much on the average, how much does it cost for one body worn camera?
Well, I mean, the top line is the technical costs. So it would cost us, the equipment itself is about $55,000 a year. So it's a lease, and so I could break it down by officers. You know, probably, I don't know, $1,500, something like that, for the actual the equipment itself.
Okay. All right. So if you move down the table to the sergeant, I am guessing that a sergeant will be an FTE whose sole responsibility will be dedicated to this body worn camera issue.
That would be their primary responsibility.
Okay.
I mean, you know, it's one of those things where no one gets to do one thing at Tumwater PD, only one thing. And so, yeah, that would be their primary responsibility, is equipment and the implementation and deployment of the body worn camera system, maintenance of it.
Okay, so I'm asking that question because I think, in my opinion, that if we have some of the civilian FTE with the police department, or even hiring one or two, can actually defray that cost so that this may actually look more palatable when this is presented.
The reason we chose a sergeant to run this program is, one, it has to, ideally it'd be someone with some supervisory capacity, because they have to be able to implement policy, oversee internal investigations, and understand patrol operations at a high level, so that they can understand the impacts of body worn cameras, deployments, implementations. If an officer's having a challenge with it, you know, that's one of the things that unless you do the job, if you have someone in a civilian role and an officer and they ask, well, why didn't your camera record this interaction? And the officer says, oh, well, I didn't need to record it because of this, this, and this. Unless you do the job, you may not be able to discern what's really going on, and having a sergeant take on that role, we thought would be ideal. We looked at it from many different angles, and we've tried to minimize the costs and the impacts as much as we could. But we think to run a program at a high level, we think it's our opinion that a sergeant or someone with supervisory ability that understands patrol operations and understands current police procedure would have to be someone to manage that program.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. On that note, those are the two questions I have.
Peter, can I ask my
So-
questions again?
Yes, please.
Thank you. With that slide, you don't have to bring it back up, but we've had a presentation over a prospective flock system. So with that sergeant and with the IT specialist, if you want to move forward with flock and council approves that, would that position cover both of those, like all these new technologies, or are those additional jobs that you had talked about?
Flock specifically is far less impactful. It is more of an automated type of a database system. And so I think we could actually run that with our current staffing. It's very different. The body worn cameras are completely a different model. And we've learned a lot from our deployment of our in-car camera systems and those technologies, and just the impacts that those have had on that training lieutenant role. So they're similar as far as their technology, but their impacts to our operation are very, very different.
Thanks, Commander. When doing this research, is anyone tracking like efficiencies and effectiveness in officers writing the reports because they have the body camera versus a dash camera, right? Any data research on like cases of domestic violence, of they said, but having that footage of body camera. Is any research done on that, of any effectiveness and efficiencies?
I would say actually a vast majority of the research is done precisely on that. And unfortunately, it kind of paints a very similar picture that it can go one way or the other. There are instances where the cameras can really demonstrate, you know, who said the correct thing when who didn't, and, you know, who did the actions. But also then when you don't have the camera, or it was obfuscated by the officer or something, that leads to more issues and more kind of like complexities in the individual cases. So it can be a huge benefit, but it can also be a huge hindrance. I mean, some prosecutors' offices, even in Washington, get incredibly tricky when you don't have footage that corroborates or does something, which then leads, you know, to, you know, make it harder to take cases. As for the other side, it's more of a policy thing. The research shows that officers' reports are more accurate when they have access to their own footage. However, that creates other policy-related issues in terms of giving them access to be able to view their own footage and then effectively control their own narrative. Instead of reporting what they like remember happening, they just report what they see on their own screen, which then causes other issues when, you know, something comes up later on. So that's a like heavily studied area. The problem, as with everything else, is that there isn't really a definitive answer. It's more of a, it can show these benefits, but also there are these other kind of like negative components to it.
So with everything we've heard today, and I appreciate that, and this is going to be an ongoing discussion, what does council need to take away from this? Because we're hearing, well, it could be this, could be that. There's no standardization. What does council need to take away from this? That it's a recommendation that we do move forward, and I'm still questioning the timeline. But like, what was the purpose of, what do we need to take away from this?
I think from my side, the one thing that I really need to get across, and because body-worn cameras is something that I've been researching for many years now. And I think the thing that is really important is the expectations. Whatever outcomes and impacts you want from body-worn cameras, you don't get to choose them. You can build a program, you can control the policy, you can set all of these parameters, but the outcomes that you get are entirely dependent on your community, the relationship with your community, the organizational dynamics of the department. So for example, there are departments who say, we have an issue with instances of use of force, let's get body-worn cameras. And their instances of use of force go up because they got it trying to achieve a goal. The purpose here is showing we know so much more about body-worn cameras, and there is not a definitive answer of what they achieve. So getting them for the right reasons, because you want to, you know, try and achieve, you know, higher transparency, or you want to support the officers, you want to support the community, all of that, absolutely fine. But going into it with some kind of directed goal is inherently problematic, because the research shows that there isn't going to be one categorical outcome. And I think understanding kind of the lay of the land, especially in terms of like, you know, the officer stress and burnout, that's something that we now know, which is something we have to factor in. And the less discretion and less community-oriented policing is a very significant component in a city like Tumwater, where that's what the community wants, that's what the community expects. And body-worn cameras have been shown to potentially lessen that. So I think it's being aware of the potential consequences, pitfalls. The positive sides to it as well, they're just as important, but it's kind of, from my side, it's showing that it's not just, here's all these great things, it's also, it could also go this other way. And I just like to make sure that everyone has all the available information that we can, so that the decisions that are made are based on, you know, good research and good data.
Thank you. I just have one more question, Peter, and then you can move on to the next agenda item. In this biennium budget, it was proposed for city hall upgrades, and that was pulled, and that was $450,000. Is there an opportunity? In one of the slides, it noted no space for police. Could that be part of upgrades, or is the police department completely separate from any city hall upgrades? I don't know if that's a question for Troy, or is there an opportunity, since that was pulled, to make space that way?
That's a great question. I can't answer that one directly, but now we're getting back into the strategic growth plan, and we're actually getting into a much bigger and needed discussion citywide. You know, we're talking about the police department, but what impacts does this have citywide? Because it's not just the police department that has facility needs. So I see both Lisa and Troy are on here, so.
I'm unmuted first, so I'll go, Troy. So yes, City Hall in particular is busting at the seams, not just on the police department side, but on the admin and the community development finance side as well. Additionally, we need to be addressing some issues with regard to safety and security at City Hall. So we have on the list of things to do, doing a needs assessment as well as sort of a safety assessment of City Hall itself. I think in terms of, so that needs to happen first, because we, instead of making these incremental, $400,000 here, $200,000 there, $300,000 there, we want to take a look at this and try to do it more comprehensively and address the entirety of the need. Maybe that means we still phase in improvements over time, but we need to understand what the need is and what the plan is moving forward from an overall perspective. With regard to finding space specifically for the police department, whether it's this program or some other program, it's entirely probable that we'll need to find some interim space for the police department, regardless of body worn cameras or why we're adding resources and officers. We're gonna have to find probably an interim solution, because we just aren't able to pack cops in the same amount of space as we can pack building inspectors and, finance folks. So I hope that answered your question.
And you'll get a lot more of that, Councilmember Dolhoff, when we get into the whole strategic growth plan.
Yeah.
Because there is so much more to this than body worn cameras. Body worn cameras is a great tool and something we are going to advocate for, but there are a lot of considerations for the council, not only in the police department, but in the city. And how do we prioritize those? Because we just don't have the money to afford all of it.
Right. I guess one question that wasn't answered is, when is it proposed that the Thurston County Prop 1 funds would be coming into the city?
I can answer that for you. So the April 1st, the collections started, the tax rate increased by that 2 cents. And we expect the first payment of funds to reach the city in June. And yeah, so about the second half of the year, we should be starting, we'll be receiving funds.
So thank you, Troy. So from now to June, when is it going to be like a proposal of the uses of those funds to council?
Our plan was to, that we're not, starting in June, it's not that much money
Right.
to do anything with. So our plan was just to work that into the budget that we're working on, that we're starting to work on now. So basically to start using the funds in 25.
2020. Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the 25-26 budget biennium from both police and fire. You
Gotcha.
will see that identified because it's not just us. And so we have further meetings planned ahead with Troy, Lisa, Chief Hurley, and myself to figure out how we're going to break that down. And you'll see that come through the budget.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief, and Troy and Lisa.
So on that note, we move to item number 6, resolution number R2024-009, Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan Update. Brian Holly. Brian, please.
All right, good morning, council members. I'll try to share my screen here. All right, is everyone seeing that okay? All right. So we're at a phase now. Here we need to consider updating our comprehensive emergency management plan. So I put together some slides to guide us through a discussion on this topic. So our agenda is just to talk about our emergency management program, talk about the update and the required resolution for this. And, just briefly, as you know, emergency management encompasses a lot of things. Larger emergencies that take a lot of resources to manage. And, one thing that I just wanted to point out recently that may not be obvious in some cases is, the bridge collapse in Baltimore. That was a situation even where they had an emergency operations center activation, and I'm sure it's still activated at this point because of those impacts. And really, what is emergency management? It creates the framework to reduce vulnerabilities and cope with disasters. You know, there are other resources through the federal and state government that can come in and support us as well. But really the goal is a safe, secure, and resilient community. Just a reminder, at the top are the 5 mission areas in the response framework that we focus on: prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. And then there are also below that 32 core capabilities that need to be incorporated into your plan. Here in the city for emergency management, the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, or the CEMP, is the guiding document. We also have a city emergency management committee made up of directors and some senior managers. We coordinate through that committee city and department emergency management activities. We coordinate training for city staff. We plan and execute exercises. And if needed, support the staff and support the Emergency Operations Center. The plan guides our response. We're here today because it needs to be updated on a 5-year cycle. There was a 1-year extension to that. We are required to have an updated CEMP to receive FEMA grant funding as well. We submitted our updated plan to the state through the Emergency Management Division at the end of 2023, and they acknowledged and reviewed it we got acknowledgement of that in a letter to the mayor in February of this year. Our plan meets 100% of the legal requirements for a comprehensive plan. They also in the review suggest revisions to consider as we update the plan in the future. What's changed? Really, we took a comprehensive look, really, and I'll be very transparent. We work very closely with staff from the city of Olympia on this, as we have on previous plans. They have a great deal of expertise that we've leaned on, and we've updated our plan really to align with theirs in a lot of ways. It's a new look, it's a new format, but some of the main things are we removed unnecessary jargon. And really a key thing is at the bottom of the page. It's been reorganized by departments instead of what are known as emergency support functions. So really, what does that mean? It means anybody who works in one of our departments, whether it's transportation, water, police, fire, it really outlines for each department what their responsibilities are with regards to emergency management, which is a new format. We also added some things, and these are items that we're going to need to continue to work on. We look at our whole community in the concept of operations. And what does that mean? We have certainly in our community, community members with limited English proficiency. So we need to be able to make sure we're communicating with our entire community. And these are areas that we have work to do on, but we've identified them in the plan. Same thing with access and functional needs. If we order an evacuation, there are members of our community who are going to have difficulty evacuating, and we need to try to identify where we can best help those folks out. We specify again the 5 mission areas and core capabilities. There is in the document a correlation between emergency support functions, and I won't get into those details today as to what those are, but we have coordinated the required emergency support functions with what each department has to do. We also continue to focus on recovery planning, and there'll be more work coming here in Thurston County. And I know Councilmember Dahlhoff and others have participated in some recovery exercises. And Thurston County, with the leadership in emergency management, has a definite interest and has their staffing back at a point now where I think we can begin to address recovery efforts again. Just to real briefly to remind everybody, you know, day-to-day emergencies, we do this every day, right? Police, fire, transportation, engineering, water resources. Every day there's something going on that's unexpected. You know, for police and fire, that's what we do, but even for other city departments and probably some I didn't list here, they're just things that go on every day that we're able to manage. But what happens when we have larger or complex emergencies. And that's when we start talking about an emergency operations center. Those functions are outlined in the plan. And the EOC provides support to field operations. We don't run field operations from the EOC. They're there to support field operations, get resources, and coordinate activities. Documentation is also very important, and I'm sure Troy can speak and Karen can speak to that. You know, as we seek reimbursement, possibly from FEMA, we need to document everything that we're doing, and the EOC helps with that. And who makes the call to open the Emergency Operations Center? Really, it would be a consultation between the fire chief, the city administrator, and the mayor as to whether to officially activate the Emergency Operations Center. And it's been many years since we've done that. I believe it was in a Nisqually earthquake that we last had a full activation. We've certainly had partial activations with weather events over the years at a lower scale. And in the EOC, you know, there's an EOC manager, we have a PIO, a council liaison, but really we have the general staff. And I always liked this description. We have an operations division, they're the doers. We have a planning division, they're the thinkers. We have a logistics division, they're the getters, they find things. And we have the finance division who talk about and consider how we're going to pay for things. So those are just some of the positions that we would have in an emergency operations center. And this is just the diagram that is the overview of the command structure in an emergency operations center. Just briefly, and I think when we talk about this at council, hopefully next week, if there's a recommendation, we can touch a little bit more on elected officials' roles and responsibilities, but really communication, policy decisions. And, you know, there could be a declaration of an emergency that from the mayor that council would then have to take up, possibly, and certainly efforts from council to support response effort and support recovery efforts. So the resolution we're bringing before you today is required to promulgate the update of the comprehensive emergency management plan. And you can see here it cites the code and the RCW. The resolution was in your packet. And here is the recommendation that we're asking for today. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Peter, can I ask a question?
Yes, Leah, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Hi, Chief. So a couple of questions is talking about elected officials' roles. Is council included in annual exercises, or do we get a summary so that we can like update policies if needed? How is council included in annual exercises?
Yeah, I think it just depends on the scale of the exercise. I mean, our emergency management committee, we may just have tabletop exercises where we would talk about a weather event or something like that. I think a larger scale exercise that would involve council would probably be more like you experienced before with the Homeland Security exercises. But we could certainly, you know, update council on exercises that we have with staff. So it would be the larger exercises that would involve council.
Perfect. One other question is, in the packet, there's something about whole community. I wrote page 18, but I don't know if it's a packet or the document number. And I was wondering, where are utilities and our healthcare facilities and TCOM in all of this?
Sure. You know, they're components, I think, of the different emergency support functions. And I didn't get into those details, but, you know, all of our partners, you know, we will be reaching out to and interacting with in any kind of EOC declaration or emergency. Yeah, that's why those partnerships are important. And your comment about the whole community, that's really where we need to be thinking more about accessibility, whether it's English proficiency, whether it's access and functional needs. And again, these are things that we're going to have to work on. I'm not saying we have fully vetted plans in place right now. We've just identified those are the things we need to work on.
The one thing, and this could be maybe for a future meeting, is I wrote package page 164, explaining the CEMP evaluation checklist. It's in the appendices, and it talked about the percentages in green, right? And whatever the stage is, right? And so I didn't understand the last two columns. Are we supposed to be meeting those? Should we be meeting those? Why are the percentages all over the place?
Yeah, well, let me back up and say first, they evaluate the plan to meet for legal requirements. We meet all of the legal requirements. The state then does an assessment of your plan and identifies areas where you might be able to improve, and that's why the percentages aren't all 100% in that. And they have, say, tier 1 recommendations, tier 2 recommendations, and it's certainly not uncommon for plans to have areas where they can improve, and that's what we'll continue to work on.
Got it. Thank you, Chief.
So, any more questions? No.
I can do one
So,
more, Peter. I
okay.
was gonna say,
Oh, go ahead.
the one thing, Chief's like, enough. The other one I was thinking about is I had page 132 energy, and I've had two different constituents talk about like the idea of in like land that has gopher presence and we can't develop it to do like raised solar panel or like backup battery storage. Is that something that if that was moving forward, that would help this plan for like response and recovery for like energy?
I'm not sure from the cities. I mean, it could for businesses and homeowners with regards to recovery. I'm not sure
Right.
for the city it would necessarily. You know, certainly that's a hot topic right now as far as energy storage systems. And you know, for us here in the city, we have needs for emergency power and such that we currently have generators. Possibly in the future, those could be stored, other kinds of stored energy devices. But in the community, I think it would more be that recovery and resiliency piece for a business to be able to operate, you know, without being connected to the grid.
Gotcha. Thanks, Chief.
So on that note, there is an action item for us to either approve or disapprove to move the resolution for the mayor's signature. So all in favor of moving our resolution number R2024?
Peter, we gotta make a motion. You need a motion in a second.
Okay. So I did say all in favor of, and I was reading the resolution before I said that, before I did that. So do I have a yes or no in favor of moving the resolution to the mayor for signature?
I move to recommend resolution number R2024-009, Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan update to the full council for approval at the April 16, 2024 meeting under consideration.
I'll
I
second.
was doing that, and then you stopped me, and then you said what I was going to do. So, okay.
Well, I mean, Peter, if you want to make the motion, but normally like we assist you in making the motion so you can run the meeting. But if you want to make the motion, by all means, go ahead.
So the motion is on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the motion passes. Brian, the approved letter does not require any action, right?
No, the action that's required is what you just took. We'll take this up under consideration at the April 16th council meeting now. We'll have another short briefing and an opportunity then to vote on the resolution.
Okay. All right. On that note, we move to additional items.
I don't have any.
I don't either.
So I'd like to revisit my earlier discussion about the community policing. And in the decade and a half, actually two decades that I've lived in Tumwater, I have noticed that Tumwater Police Department have done an awesome job. And it appears that what we do not have is an active community policing program, because Commander Mason, if I understood this comment correctly, is that that is based upon a philosophy. Well, a philosophy introduces a concept, and currently in Tumwater, our police department are actually doing that. It's just not officially proclaimed yet. So if we are doing that, we ought to be tooting our own, because if we don't, nobody else is going to toot our own for us. So I think, in my opinion, that we need to have an official community policing program. Now, we don't have to hire anybody to staff that, but if we are currently doing some of those duties, we just need to make it a more official. So Chief Wicks, what do you say?
Can I address it real quick, Chief? So this is part of our strategic plan going forward, Councilmember Agabi. I think you'll see some of this addressed. Oh, dang it. Are you?
You kind of cut off.
Yeah, I think everyone has just frozen, apart from me, apparently. I know what Commander Mason was going to say is this is a big part of our strategic growth plan to cement this and really show more that we are already doing this, and to kind of demonstrate that to the community and kind of cement that role. Oh, I think they're back. Okay. You're mute, Jay. Jay, you're muted.
Oh, that's a very
I think I've been using Zoom for like 5 seconds, right? I haven't done this for the past 4+ years. And that is on a recorded line. I understand that. So anyways, so I think you'll see some of this addressed in our strategic plan going forward. We could have a policy. The problem is, I mean, outside of treating people with respect, we want our people to engage our community positively. I mean, it has to be greater than a policy. And I think that there are some roles that we can take on. And I think there's some positions that could be added long-term that can help facilitate this. As our community grows, I think we need to understand the needs of certain sectors better. And we have to build capacity to help us do that really well. I can talk to you offline about some of the things we've done with our retail organizations, our faith-based organizations, our schools, some of our nonprofits. But I don't know, I'm not aware that there's a way to set that into policy. It has to be something that we believe in.
Thank you very much. So, does anybody have any other item to add before we adjourn?
No, thank you, Peter.
On that note, Leanne, we'll see you this evening. And come with yourself. You folks have a great day, and thank you for meeting with us this morning. Bye-bye.